Hi, this is Worth Godwin, worthgodwin.com. Plain English simplicity for a complex modern world. In this video, I want to talk about some more topics that relate to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but we're not going to be focusing so much on the currency that's at this point. It is definitely relates to it, but there's some important concepts that I want you to get that are not directly technology related, but this is actually going into some of my other areas of interest and knowledge, including the way the human mind works and the brain, which is something that I've been studying since 1990 and quite extensively. One of the concepts I came across while studying something called NLP was the idea of a nominalization. And a nominalization is something where we treat something as a noun or as a thing, when in fact it is more of an abstract concept. And it really, what it is it actually is describing a process. And by a process, I mean either a series of physical actions, or more typically I mean an intellectual or emotional process. So it's something that is internal to our experience. It is not physically, it doesn't physically exist outside of us, outside of our heads or our hearts, or however you want to put it. But it is something that we create in our minds, essentially. So examples of a nominalization would be something like love, hate, joy, passion, curiosity. Those are all emotions, and they are also nominalizations. You feel curious, to make it a nominalization, you say it is curiosity. It's not a thing, it's a process of being curious or feeling curious, okay? And nominalizations are very tricky things, and you need to watch out. I highly encourage you to really try to understand this concept and look for it, listen for it when people are talking, particularly if they're politicians, by the way, because, like, for example, terror, like as in the war on terror, terror is a nominalization. And if nominalizations aren't real, they aren't actual physical things, how can you have a war on terror? That's totally a side issue, and I'm not even going to go there. But do keep that in mind, though, because it can be used, the concept, these nominalizations can be used to manipulate you. And if you aren't aware of them, then you're open to being manipulated. So that's the thing you should keep in mind. So value is a nominalization. Now, why do we value, i.e., why do we attribute value to, why do we feel that there is value in gold? There's a few things, and several things, and I'm going to list them off here just off the top of my head. I'm not reading this off a script or anything like any of my videos, but just a few of them off in no particular order would be the fact that it's scarce, the fact that it doesn't corrode, and thus it doesn't get tarnished over time. It is very malleable. We can shape it into things like jewelry or artwork or coins. It is highly conductive, so electricity runs through it, and you don't lose a lot of electricity to resistance, electrical resistance. And it is highly ductile, which means we can draw it into wires, which again, like the conductivity, is very useful these days. Useful is a nominalization too, isn't it? But how many people caught me on that one? So if these are characteristics that it has, those are intrinsic. The characteristics are intrinsic to gold. But our value that we place upon it, the feeling of value that we have when we look at gold or think about gold, is not always going to be the same. In the future, we're going to not value gold as much as we do now. And there's several reasons for that, and all of it has to do with the technological progression that's going on right now that's very, very rapid. The scarcity is going to be reduced because we are going to be able to start getting gold out of the ocean, for example. We're going to be able to mine it from the ground more efficiently and effectively and cheaply. We're also going to be able to get it from the ocean. It's very abundant in the ocean, but it's just never been affordable to extract it, but that's changing. There's also vast, unimaginably large mineral wealth up there in space. Out there in space. And you'll notice I'm wearing my NASA shirt today. When we start mining out in space, which will happen much sooner than you might think, even though proportionately speaking, gold will still continue to be a relatively scarce mineral or metal element, it's still going to be highly plentiful, extraordinarily plentiful, because there's just so much mineral wealth out there. So that's going to essentially eliminate the whole scarcity thing, and that's one of the biggest aspects of why we consider it to be valuable, and we attribute value to it. So all the other elements, such as it being ductile and malleable and not corroding and being highly conductive, all of those traits, those aren't going to go away, but we are going to have new materials that we're going to develop that will at first be more expensive than gold because it'll be difficult to produce. But as happens with all technology, as it is adopted, it becomes, the production increases, demand increases, and the price drops. Because the production goes up, that drives up the demand, increases the production, the production lowers the price, basically. And this is, you can see this with basically every technology that has ever been. And that will happen with these various new materials that we're developing and have yet to develop, but will be developing soon, that will be like, for example, superconductors. Who cares how conductive gold is? If it's not a superconductor, it's not a superconductor, and it's not. So superconductors will completely replace any use of gold or any other similar highly conductive metals, or certainly largely replace them, because certainly reduce the demand for them, which lowers the value, perceived value, because these other materials will work better. There will be many materials that will be just as highly malleable and ductile and have all the other traits. And so I don't see that, given, first off, you know, the understanding that value is a nominalization. There is nothing intrinsic, there is no intrinsic value inside of gold. You cannot open gold up and say, oh, there's the value, there it is in the middle. It's not. It's the traits that it has, which are intrinsic to it or inherent to it, but the value is purely in the perception. And the perception of value is all that's real when it comes to value. So, and yes, it's derived from, our perception is influenced very much by utilitarian functionality and other material benefits that a thing brings us, whether it be gold or, say, Bitcoin. But the value is only there because we attribute it. So the more people that attribute the value and recognize the value in, say, Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, the more value it will have, because the value is in us. It's in our minds. It's a process. It's not physically inherent to anything. So keep that all in mind when you think about whether there's any value in Bitcoin or in the US dollar or in the British pound or in any other currency. And remember that the same thing is also true of something like gold or silver. It's all conditional. It all depends on the context and our perception. I think this is an extremely important concept to understand. Nominalizations are hugely important to understand, especially, like as I said, they're often used by politicians and others to manipulate you. And remember to recognize what a nominalization is. It is an internal, intellectual, and particularly emotional process that human beings go through. And we tend to think of these things and put them outside of ourselves and act like they're physical things, but they aren't. Value is not a physical thing. Love, hate, terror, whatever, those are not real things, even if they feel like it. And anything that we have that's in us, it's our mind, and we get to choose how it affects us. And if we accept it and we put it outside of ourselves, then we abandon that control and that choice. So keep in mind, understand nominalizations, understand value is not inherent or intrinsic to anything. The characteristics are, but the value we attribute to it, whether it be gold, silver, or Bitcoin, is all up here and in here, if you will. So I hope that makes sense. And I hope you find it of value. Thanks for watching.